Welcome to the Expert Edge. This is the show where we bring on experts in their fields of health and wellness practice. We hear their stories and we learn what they see working in the field of diabetes reversal and prevention. And I'm really happy to introduce today's guest, Dr. Richard Powers. Welcome, Dr. Powers.
Hi, thank you. So good to be here with you.
As an integrative physician, researcher, and educator for over 40 years, Dr. Powers loves to use the latest medical advances to provide wholesome and scientifically sound guidance so that people can make better and more informed decisions and regain and protect their health. He did his pre-med studies at Tulane University with a physics major and earned his doctorate in chiropractic medicine in 1980, graduating summa cum laude. That means with straight A's, basically. He founded the Holistic Healing Center in Atlanta, co-founded the Holistic Medical Center in Stuart, and established Intelligent Health Quarters in 2020, where he currently practices. So he's appeared on numerous television and radio shows as a health expert and has been teaching physicians integrative functional medicine approaches to chronic diseases, such as breast cancer prevention, for over 20 years. So as I was looking at some research, just getting ready for this interview, I saw some really interesting studies that talked about how much risk women experience for breast cancer when they also have metabolic disorders like diabetes. That increases their risk. It increases their mortality rates. It increases all sorts of things related to the development of cancer. And we don't always think about that. But I know that that's one of your areas of work. And I'm curious as to how did you kind of get started looking at this intersection of chronic diseases like diabetes and breast cancer?
Yeah, well, how far back do you want me to go? Let me
Or
just
if you
say
want.
that, okay. So how I got into, when I was graduating high school, I was either going to be a doctor or I was going to be an auto mechanic. I wanted to fix something. Anyway, I went with doctor. And I remember as a kid growing up, people getting colds and how miserable they were. And I thought someday I'm going to grow up, I'm going to find a cure to the common cold. And then, of course, that developed into looking as an adult and as a doctor that the chronic diseases, the diabetes and the cancer and the heart disease, those are the things that are really the problem more than just the cold. And so I dove into all of that. And, my studies led me to Europe and studying in Germany because there's a lot of new insights coming out of there. And I had the blessing of hooking up with certain mentors that were way ahead of their time, and they really caught me up to speed. And then functional medicine was born by Dr. Jeffrey Bland back around the late 70s, early 80s. So I hooked up with him and what he was doing. And then after about 10 or 15 years, I realized, wow, we got a lot of understanding of the underlying causes of all these diseases. But how does it all fit together? It's about the adrenals and stress. No, it's about hormones. It's oxidative stress. No, it's all these different things. And I finally figured out kind of an algorithm, a way to think of them all, how they all fit together and how they all have common threads that feed forward to these diseases. It's not that you're fine and then you wake up diabetic, or you're fine and you wake up with a cancer diagnosis. I mean, unfortunately, sometimes that's how it happens. We just get the diagnosis, we're just told. But the process of cancer, for example, most cancers take 30 to 40 years in their development. And I could talk more about what is happening that's developing, but the underlying threads, the underlying causes, the things that predispose us to diabetes. And it starts out with prediabetes or insulin resistance and hypoglycemia, different names.
Mhm.
Metabolic syndrome is when you talk about problems with blood sugar regulation and you're linking it now to cardiovascular health and blood pressure and your waist measurement. The metabolic syndrome was a concept that came up when they realized that when you do have blood sugar problems, regulating blood sugar, which at its worst is called diabetes, there are these other things that are commonly associated with it. So then they said, oh, let's call this metabolic syndrome. And then, of course, as you found out, the research shows that, wow, when you have blood sugar regulation problems, you tend to have a much higher risk of cancer, and certainly including breast cancer.
Mhm.
And so do you want me to get into like, how does that
Sure.
hook? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
talk to us about that
Yeah,
connection.
yes, yes, yes. It's so cool. So if we think about what is diabetes, and most of the time we're talking about type 2 diabetes, this is something you're not born with. This is something you develop. And how you develop it is you do certain things to the body that it doesn't like, and it wasn't designed to be treated that way.
Hmm.
And you don't provide certain things to the body that it was designed to have. So, for example, the diet is a really good one. Everyone knows, oh, you shouldn't eat sugar when you have diabetes. It's a blood sugar problem, so stay away from sugar. That's just the tip of the iceberg. It's certainly a big piece. I mean, we know that, well, first of all, refined and carbohydrates and starches, they break down into sugar. So that's kind of the same thing. But it's not just limited to just what turns into sugar. It's about what also affects how sugar is metabolized. Like when we eat food, it gets digested. And then one of the things that happens is sugar glucose ends up in the blood. And then we need glucose. It goes into the cells and it creates energy. But before it gets into the cell, it has to get out of the blood vessel. It's got to go through the tissue. It's got to get over the cell membrane. Once it gets in, it's got to now get over to the nuclear membrane. All these things have to happen. And every step of the way, there's room for a problem,
Mm.
meaning that if there's something in the way of that process, it's not going to happen. The blood sugar, the glucose, stays in the blood. It doesn't get out. It spikes. And then when it spikes, it damages cells. And
Mm.
if it damages blood vessels and you lose circulation to your legs and your feet, you can end up with diabetic neuropathy. You can end up losing a foot because you get gangrene. You don't have enough circulation. If it's in the brain or the eye, diabetic retinopathy. So all the different names of diseases related to diabetes and blood sugar, even the ones that include other things like metabolic syndrome, it all has to do with what happens if when the body loses its ability to keep blood sugar in a certain range, a certain tight little range. When you eat, it goes up a little bit. Then when you pull it in and you burn it, it goes down and it stays in this range. And when you have diabetes, you've lost that ability. It's going too high. When it goes high, it damages things. And
Mm.
when it goes low, you don't feel so good. We all know about that. Tired, fatigue, you can't think, you got brain fog. But if we look at the whole mechanism, when it's damaging cells, in fact, everyone knows that has diabetes that your doctor will monitor hemoglobin A1C. It's a type of hemoglobin that when it gets damaged by the spiking blood sugar, it damages this hemoglobin molecule, this complex, and the higher that number is, the more damaging the more damage that's been from the spiking blood sugar. But it doesn't just damage hemoglobin; it damages lots of things. And one of the underlying causes of cancer, doesn't matter which one, is the cells, our own cells. This isn't something that we catch. We don't catch cancer. It's our own cells that get damaged, especially the DNA gets damaged. And when blood sugar is spiking, it's another way
Mm.
of damaging cells and damaging the nucleus and the DNA. And when that gets damaged, if it doesn't get repaired, that could turn into a cancer cell. And
And
then yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and I think that's really important for us to understand. As we think about all of these factors that come together and push diseases like diabetes and like cancer, how have you found in your work with clients and in your research that what kind of like a nutritional approach seems to be really helpful in preventing breast cancer? Because we really want to talk to people today about what are things we can do to decrease our risk of breast cancer, especially if we're already dealing with something like higher blood sugars than we should have.
Yeah, and this is where it gets exciting because the same, like there's all these different diseases. Most people in this country, in the United States, they're going to die prematurely from either a heart attack, a stroke, cancer, Alzheimer's, or diabetes. That's like 4 out of 5 people. The good news is the underlying causes are shared by these diseases. They're very similar, not 100%, but like 80-90% are the same, which means if you could find out what are the solutions that address these underlying causes, not only you're reducing your risk or helping to support reversing diabetes, but you're reducing your risk of breast cancer, heart attack, strokes, Alzheimer's. So it's a beautiful thing. So what are some of those things? Well, from a diet perspective, it's a plant-centric diet
Mm.
that's whole food and less refined. Okay, so let's boil that out. What does that mean? We hear a lot about vegetarian and vegan and plant-based. The
Yeah.
bottom line is this: plants have fiber, they contain polyphenols, they're rich in antioxidants, they contain certain nutrients that are just not found in anything but plants. And all of those substances that I just labeled right there, those are all things that help protect the body from cancer, from having cells turn into cancer. Or it helps turn on mechanisms that help your body identify and kill cancer cells. Because our cells there's some cells that are turning into cancer cells in our body, but we have mechanisms that are designed to actually identify that, our immune system, and then trigger other aspects of our immune system to kill those cells. See, if we keep cancer cells in check, you never get cancer. It doesn't get to any point that's life-threatening at all.
Mm.
So, yeah,
So does this work for breast cancer too?
yes, and I did a deep dive. I spent 18 months. I just Well, it was a 4-month project. You know how that goes. It took 18 months, but I just got so excited because there's so much research that's revealing so many clues about how to reduce someone's risk of breast cancer, and that includes diet, exercise, sleep, nutrition, certain supplements, certain botanical compounds. But getting back to the diet component, there's certain foods that when you eat them, the research shows that it boosts the body's ability to either keep cancer cells in check or to take them down or to prevent them from forming in the first place. And again, those same fundamental dietary principles, more whole food, less ultra processed, a lot of plant-based or plant-centric. In other words, your plate should be a lot of vegetables, maybe some fruits, different colors, and so forth. And then the protein component, which everyone thinks is most important. It's important, but it's not like have a 16-ounce T-bone steak and a little minuscule side of salad. I mean, we got to reverse that. That's why the plant-centric, plant-based, because these plants, the right food, vegetables, fruits, they contain these substances that are only in plants, and they're very protective. And again, not just against breast cancer, but most cancers and most of these chronic diseases that we're talking about here today.
You mentioned protein because a lot of people kind of worry about, am I getting enough protein? Especially if they're moving towards putting more plants on their plate and some of that meat's going away. They're like, well, where am I going to get my protein? So, what do you tell people that are concerned about that? What are some of the best plant sources of protein?
Well, let's back up one. So there's nothing wrong with animal-based protein, right? You just want to get what's the best quality and the best type of animal source protein, and that's going to be your deep omega-3 rich fish, right? So that's your like Alaskan salmon and your sardines, and there's certain fish that so fish is a good one there, and there's certain fish that you want to eat less of because they tend to accumulate the poison that tends to be in our environment, the mercury and the chemicals. But there's certain fish that you eat more of, that's got a good source of protein plus healthy fats. And if someone wants to eat red meat, you can eat red meat. Obviously, if it's pasture raised and it's a healthier cow, then you're going to get a healthier piece of meat. But you don't want to have meat every day. You don't want to eat a lot of it. So if you rotate and try different things, so there's different fish, some meat, right? That you can get some good poultry, chicken, turkey if you want. And if you want to go to pork and eat that in that direction, you can. But smaller amounts. Obviously, the fish is a healthier animal source of protein than pork and beef. But again, it's quantity and quality and rotating. And then from a plant, okay, if someone doesn't, for whatever, right? There's health reasons to pick what you're going to eat, but there's ethical reasons, right? There's philosophical reasons.
Yep.
So for whatever reason, you want to stay in the plant kingdom. Well, seeds
Hmm.
and nuts and beans, right? So
Oh,
you hear
yeah.
about tofu. You hear even better than tofu is any kind of plant food that's fermented. It already is like kind of pre-digested, and it already is getting a running start in your body. So your kombucha, right, and your tempeh, and anything that's in the fermented category is something that is good as. But again, in fact, they make tofu, right? They take soybeans, it's a
Yep.
legume. They grind it up and they make it into a milky thing. They add something to coagulate it and they clump it up and make a tofu. They're doing the same thing with pumpkin seeds now. It's called pumpfu. They
Yes.
take pumpkin seeds, grind it, and pumpkin seeds, rich source of protein and zinc and all kinds of good things. So
Yeah.
nuts and seeds and beans and legumes. That's where you can get those other things coming from.
Well, I think it's really interesting that we often don't think about the fact that yes, meats and fish and so on can be a source of protein, but where did those animals get the protein? And they got it at some level from plants. It's like
Uh-huh.
cows eat grass and it turns into muscle. So it's like I tell people, you get to pick. Do you want your protein firsthand or secondhand? And so then they get to think about that because I think that we often don't realize that when we take it secondhand, although it can be a substantial source of protein, it often comes along with other issues. Like you mentioned, the importance of healthy animals. Much of our supermarket meat is not coming from healthy animals. And so,
Yeah, that's
those are some of the things I think we need to think about. And I like to, for myself, it's like I think it's really interesting how the Bible talks about not eating certain kinds of meat, and those are often from scavenger animals, right? Think people like fowls, that's the eagles, and those that eat dead animals, or pigs that eat garbage. And so it really does make a difference what we choose to put on our plate in terms of how it affects our bodies. And I think it's so interesting that we can actually make choices about what we put on our plate that can support our health or can like promote the growth and the progress of the cancer process. So, as we look at prevention and its aspects, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about what's a safe and effective approach to monitor breast health and catch life-threatening breast cancer early on.
yeah, look, I am not my whole career in medicine and healthcare has all been about let's just find the I just want to find the best solutions based on the research, based on how the body works in health and disease, right? So you got to it's a constant study because there's more information coming out. Things that came out, epigenetics, which is a huge, very important field, was 10 years, 15 years away from when I graduated from school. So
Right.
it's an ongoing learning process. How does the body work? What is it like? What creates health? What sabotages it?
Hmm.
And then there's looking at the research and see what's new, what's different, what have we learned? And the bottom line is I just keep looking what creates health, what sabotages it. And when I learn something new, I keep modifying. So now I got 45 years under my belt. And I said, you know what? The research and what is consistent with how the body functions in health and disease, this is what has consistently for decades is saying creates health in the research. And this is what interferes with it. And
Mm.
getting back to your point about animal food, yes, animals have when you eat muscle from an animal, you're eating a much higher concentration of protein. And you're right that whatever that animal ate will determine the quality and the health of that meat that you're now going to eat. And if that let's say that cow is eating grass or feed that is sprayed with a bunch of chemicals, well, then chemicals is going to be in the meat of that flesh. And then when you eat it, it's going to be in you. And your body has a certain ability to break that down and deal with toxins and chemicals and substances in the environment. But there's so far more of that now in our air, our water, our food, our home, our yard, our workplace, the golf course. There's so much of it. It's way beyond now what our body was designed naturally to deal with. So,
Absolutely.
it, yeah. So
So
when you eat,
so how do we catch cancer early? Because that's kind of where we were going.
yeah, okay, yes, it's all related. But
It
how you
is.
catch
It's
it
completely
early,
related.
yeah, right? Because toxins in our diet, air, and water is one of the things that triggers diabetes. By the way, is a direct correlation between toxins and diabetes. Everyone thinks sugar, toxins as well, and getting good sleep and exercising, all those pieces. But how you monitor the best way to monitor breast health, and where I went what I was trying to explain before is I'm not against anything. I am for anything that the research and the physiology says this makes sense. And unfortunately, taking breast x-rays, it was a good concept. It's like, hey, let's x-ray the breast. We x-ray bones and shoulders. We x-ray different things. Let's x-ray the breast and let's see if we can check for developing breast cancer coming on early and use it as a good screening tool. And the research it doesn't substantiate that it actually has helped. 10, 11 years ago, long time ago already, there was a 90,000 woman study. That's a big study. 90,000 women. They, over 25 years, they took half the group and they looked at them and they said, okay, they get mammograms regularly, and this group didn't get any mammograms. And then they looked at the end, and during the course of the study, there wasn't any difference in how many women were dying from breast cancer, whether they got mammograms or not. So right there, that tells you breast x-rays doesn't seem to be a good approach for monitoring that. And we can explain why, but that's the bottom line. It didn't work. It doesn't work for screening. What does work is combining a number of, there isn't one test. Even a biopsy isn't nearly 100% accurate, but you combine. So how do you tell, how is my breast health? Mm. Is it, are they healthy? Is it borderline? Do I have some cancer in there? How do you know that? You combine several things. First of all, you do your breast self-exam once a month. You don't obsess on any of this. You do once a month and you do it the right way. And it's beyond the scope of this, we can go over, but there's a right way to do that that has actually been shown to be more effective. Just doing a breast self-exam the right way has been shown to find more cancers than even mammography. But that's
interesting.
The point is, that's one thing. Now, do you want to just count on that? No, because we have other technologies that are safe and harmless that we can add information to that to get another angle on this. And that's a breast thermogram. That's just measuring heat radiation from the breast. And wherever there's cancer forming, there's more blood flow and there's more heat. Now, does a thermogram showing up something mean you have breast cancer? None of these things mean you have breast cancer. They're just things that point in a direction. You get a breast ultrasound, and then all of a sudden you say, wait a minute, I found something on my exam. The breast thermogram shows some heat there. The ultrasound shows something. Could be. We still don't know, because there's far more things that are not breast cancer than it is. But then how do you finally know that? You do a breast MRI, right? And you don't even necessarily have to use contrast. And there's certain types of MRIs that help with that. But you combine this, and then you obviously, if you hook up with a doctor that uses these technologies and is aware of these diagnostic approaches, then you have a good formula to monitor your breast health and catch things early on and not have a bunch of false positives. Over 95% of every woman that's told, you had a breast mammogram and we want you to come back, we found something. 95 out of 100 times, there was nothing there. But oh boy, how alarming that is, right? Those are false positive results. Sometimes they even do biopsies, they do all these things. So mammograms, which are breast x-rays, just hasn't turned out to be an effective screening tool. You combine these other things done right, and you'll get there for sure.
So if someone, for example, is doing regular self-exams, not finding anything, how often should they have any other kind of check?
Yes. So one of the things that, so I took all these findings and I laid it out on an easy course that we'll talk about at the end here. But one of the things that I included is how to estimate your breast cancer risk. You either have an average risk, or maybe you have a below average risk of breast cancer, or maybe you have a higher risk of breast cancer. So I show you how to evaluate which one it is. Then you just look at, am I an average risk? Then you get a breast thermogram maybe every couple of years. If you're a high risk, maybe you want to do that every year, right? Because you're a higher risk, you want to catch it sooner, right? So how often you do these things depends on whether you have an average risk, a lower risk, or a higher risk.
Okay. So you would say the first step after the self-exam in terms of screening would be the thermogram versus a mammogram or an MRI?
Yes, and sometimes the doctor or the insurance company will require a mammogram before they'll order a breast thermogram or an ultrasound, or maybe you've had a breast thermogram, ultrasound, and you want an MRI, and they say, oh, you haven't had a mammogram yet. Okay, so you may have to get it, but you're not relying on the mammogram to say, how am I,
Yeah.
right? What risk am I? How's my breast health? And yeah, so that's how that works.
Yeah, well, I think that's really helpful because it can be confusing sometimes when we're just trying to figure out, do I listen to what this doctor says? Is this the schedule I should be on, or what have you? Um, and I love that you have this kind of free course about breast cancer prevention. And we're going to be putting the link to that right in the description below this video. But tell us a little bit about what'll happen when people click on that link.
Yeah, so I created this course like after this 18-month dive. I said, wow, there's a lot more that can be done to reduce significantly, not just a little, but to significantly reduce your risk of breast cancer. And I said, okay. And so I organized it. Okay, these are the diet, exercise, and sleep things that the research says if you do this, it lower your risk. These are the toxins and the drugs to minimize your exposure to, reduce your risk. And then this is how to monitor that I just briefly outlined, how to monitor your breast health, estimate your risk. But I set it up in a way that I always give you the broken up into little lessons, little 15-minute lessons with the key points at each one. And anything that you really have to remember, I put in a little document that you can download, and I put all those in a booklet.
Perfect.
But if you want to learn more about this course, right? I said, well, let me just put together a little 15-minute, 18-minute little a presentation that gives you some valuable information and helps you understand if, hey, this makes sense to me. This feels good. I want to know this. And then you have an opportunity to then actually purchase the course. And right now,
Mm.
I have it at a 64% off. Don't ask me how I came up with that number.
I love
I
it.
want it to be available. There's
Yeah.
there's 8 billion people. There's 4 billion women on this planet, and breast cancer is still one of the main things that are going to take a woman's life. And when you take out heart disease, strokes, and heart attacks, and take out maybe lung cancer from smoking, breast cancer is the thing. And the answers exist. It's not that the answers don't exist anymore. They are, and they've been served up in this course in a way that's simple and practical. And if it's not sustainable, it's not going to make any difference. I teach you how to do this, incorporate it in a way that fits into busy lives. And this little free webinar helps to open that door and let you get a peek at what's on the other side of that.
I love that. So you can get a little taste test of his course when you click on this link. It'll kind of give you a little introduction. And if you decide you want to dive deeper, it'll tell you exactly how to do it. So I really, really appreciate the fact that you are pulling together all of this experience, research, information that you have learned over many decades and are packaging it in ways that each one of us can grab a hold of, get some really practical information about, and really make a difference in our own health outcomes. And so I just want to really say thank you so much for being willing to share that with us today. I think that just understanding a little more about this connection and some of the things that we can actively do to reduce our risk are so valuable. And as you're listening here, I want you to remember health is wealth, and it comes by choice, not by chance. So thank you for joining us here today.
And thank you.